All right, welcome to lesson 64. This is going to be a multiple part lesson just because the lesson is so long. As you can see, if you look at the bottom left hand corner, it's 36 slides. So I'm going to just chop it up into consumable segments so that you can just watch them and get what you need, take a bit of a break, watch the next one, take a bit of a break, perhaps, and then maybe be another one. I think I'm going to split into three, but let's see how it goes. So because there's just so much to cover, I want to get started. Just note that it is about sports news, traffic, and weather, part 112. And you can go check out, obviously, excuse that, excuse me, on page 181 to 182, 217 to 236 in Creating Powerful Radio. All right, right. So let's start with the beginning, right at the beginning with compiling news. The four pillars of content are important in radio. So these four pillars are news, sports, traffic, and weather, regardless of the kind of radio station that you do find yourself presenting on. So whether it be campus community, PBS, or commercial, international, doesn't matter. These segments will still be part of radio shows. Not all of them, as we've discussed before. They obviously are not relevant for nighttime shows and weekend shows on certain weekday shows even. We might not have all the news, or all the sport, or all the traffic, or all the weather, but we will find the segments definitely on breakfast and drives. For example, we might find a large amount of news carrying on till about 1 o'clock on weekends. Sports might be popular on Saturdays up to about 1 o'clock too. And traffic obviously is essential throughout the mornings, definitely in the middays and up to the afternoon drives, as well as weather is relevant throughout the day then as well, right? Okay. So the first types of information that are critical when it comes to information listeners are those that affect their direct environment, the news, sport, traffic, and the weather, right? So, the four pillars of content news is the segment of content that a listener can obtain every hour in a neatly packaged bulletin report. If you listen to the news, which you should because you are a media practitioner, and we all have heard the news or watched the news or read the news before, you know that I mean, it's a profession on its own. That's why we have degrees and we have diplomas in journalism alone. We have certificates as well. We also have you perhaps studying it maybe to second year if you are not majoring in it at all. Maybe well, I would say there's different times. Also, there's not maybe there is there's broadcast journalism, again versus our printed media, and again the kind of compartmentalization and segmentation of how it is that we compile and we also source and conduct the news on each one of these platforms. News contains a number of stories with supported information. Yeah, so from exact that definition, if you look at the word news, you find the word new in there. It's got to be new, one, so that we know that it is relevant and it's contextually relevant to our listeners. But also, again, news is factual, right? So nothing that is sensationalistic, and it's not something that includes opinion. We are all about the facts, and at most radio stations, a news bulletin is followed by a report on sport, traffic, and weather. As you've heard, that also might vary from station to station on how that is constructed. The reason why these stations do this is for practice. What I'm saying practice is they're trying to see what will fit better, what will work better with their listeners when they do receive the Rams reports and they do surveys and whatever it may be. They might find that a certain listenership will prefer a shorter news bulletin. They might prefer cryptocurrencies. They might prefer trending tags, hashtags, should I say. They might prefer that there is traffic four times within an hour, or they might prefer that there is traffic only at the top and the bottom of the hour. It doesn't matter, right? So the bulletins themselves, the holistic bulletins that include all these elements, will vary from station to station. But what we do is obviously teach the elements and how to do them and how to execute them and how to construct them. And then you will not be, I mean, you'll be at a professional standard once you do reach that particular space and place at a station itself. Okay, so sports is important because it is a particular type of news. It is recreational. Sports is recreational in terms of the actual. I mean, the yes, it is. We know that sporting is professional, but consuming sport is a recreational habit of ours. It is something that we can definitely live without, but we choose not to. And the world loves sports, right? It is a hobby to some people, it is a fandom for other people, and it is basically a second skin to some very few fanatics, some very hardcore fanatics. So remember that recreational activities like sports, that they form a part of our listeners' lifestyle, and so it is important to know what is going on, and it is not a tune out factor. So that is also very important. But we do know that news itself is much more important and more relevant and more listened to and more consumed by a listener than sport is, from our research that we do find in the Rams. Okay, so it is sport can unify provinces and nations and people from different sects of life. We can consider like a, let's say you go to like a soccer club, okay? And if we're to also think about different types of people that might go to a soccer club and enjoy, let's say, soccer, like watching soccer or football. So you would find obviously the fans, you would find, let's say, amateur players that do go there, you would find maybe coaches might even go there. So in that way you can start seeing and you can start extending that kind of type of group think, to different types of people. But now what they have in common is not a race or an age, but it's more of a likability thing. It's a there's there's a there's a speciality to what it is unifying them as a group, right? So there was always much to write about when it comes to sport and many things to share on air, whether it is fixtures or whether it is, um, the reports on political angles. There is scandals. There are, promotions. There's new coaches. There are new captains. There are the Olympics, for example, whatever it may be. So big events. Let's go to the weather and the traffic. The weather and traffic need live and regular updating, so it is not relevant to our listener if it is not accurate. And if it's not accurate, it doesn't mean that it means that it isn't on time, right? So when I say on time, what is relevant for the weather right now? So I'm recording this at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If I'm going to switch the radio on and I'm going to listen to a weather update, what I would prefer to know is currently what the weather is outside because I'm maybe in the office or I'm at home or yeah, possibly maybe at the gym. It doesn't really matter. I don't know. And I want to kind of prepare myself for maybe the most, right? So if it is raining and it's a heavy rain or maybe there's hail and I'm at work, I might prefer to know that so that perhaps I don't want to drive right after work. I might decide to maybe put in another hour or two at work and decide, to go home a bit more safely. Whether I'm at home, I might want to just like grab a jacket or two. I don't know how, let's say, cold it might be, and it will help me as a listener and as a consumer, right? The traffic is of the same. It's of the same context, right? So I would like to know whether my commute is going to be obstructed by, let's say, accidents or let's say road works, whatever it may be. And again, these updates are important to the listener, right? And just in terms of weather, for example, again, just looking at the time is very important. What I would like to know also is how cold it's going to get tonight. Should it be something like right now we're recording in winter, so it would be nice to just kind of prepare myself if there's load shedding as well. I'm gonna just mentally prepare myself. It's a bit of a courtesy from the radio station and the radio presenter or the news journalist or news anchor to be able to share that information. And again, this is about a lifestyle choice radio, I'm saying. And so we want to extend the needs to the listener's lifestyle as well. Each person waking up in the morning wants to carry out their plans with as much efficiency and pleasure as possible. And so, wearing the right shoes or wearing the right coat or not wearing too much, on yourself and it's a hot day and you're uncomfortable, whatever it is, this gives you a little bit of empowerment to know. that you made the right choice. So, how do we build a great news team? Okay, so let's look at a couple of points. Desire or hunger is crucial, right? When we say desire or hunger, yes, I think that's very important for every single job. But a desire or hunger for a journalist themselves is super essential because they have to have this drive to find stories where there's an invisible world around them. So when I say invisible world, the stories aren't exactly popping out and serving themselves on a silver platter to the presenter, or should I say the journalists themselves. Like they've got to be hungry to go find the truth, one, and to go find what is happening in the world around them. The storyteller needs to exude a lot of energy, right? So when they are presenting, when they are field reporting, whether it is in any one of those in between roles that we might find within the news department, like you still got to put your all in execution as well. Super serving the listener is important, right? So super serving means getting the right information and also being the first to do that. That's what makes it new or news. Reward people for excellent work. So nurture your team. This is what we want to be able to look at if we are a news editor, and make sure that we know how to, be able to share some kind of reward system, whether it is complimentary or being able to promote them or be able to, maybe give them a bit of a bonus, whatever it may be, or an award. We might look for externally. It doesn't really matter. Don't be interchangeable. Be an individual. So, in other words, don't let others and other stations' thoughts and their thought process affect or have an effect on you. But be an individual thinker to be a great news team and a news person, right? A news professional, and whenever possible, record and use very natural sound. Okay, so whether that be something that has a bit of, I'm going to say, like a bit of atmosphere. So you're at a sporting event, you want to be able to make sure that you are kind of upbeat and in tune with what is going on there. If it's, let's say, like a very brutal loss thing, you want to be able to show a little bit of emotion in your, I'm saying, your sports relay of that particular bulletin. And it depends on what role you are also playing, that type of natural progression and that natural execution. Remember, the execution of news is a little bit more monotone, a little bit more clinical than the sports as well, with the traffic also a little bit more comforting, a little bit more of a guidance, and then something small like the weather, a little bit more relatable to be able to just make sure that we are able to chop and change and shift and shape ourselves like a chameleon wherever we are and whatever role we are busy with. Okay. If news is presented in a boring manner, listeners tune out. And when I say boring, please, you mustn't add color like, oh, this is happening in the States today. No, we don't do that. We mean that you have to be confident and you have to have ownership and you have to have important and interesting and relevant and contextual information that you are again executing and delivering and communicating to your listener. Mike Sugarman advises reporters to take risks. First, learn the rules of traditional journalism, then go ahead and break them. That's on page 22, 226. So he always has one warning: avoid making mistakes with actual facts completely. Like that's not even a maybe. Like always check your facts because your integrity is built on that. And then we can let me just quickly, I'm just going to quickly grab my textbook here. Just give me a second so I can read this with you. All right, so I'm looking at Valerie Geller's Beyond Powerful Radio, page 227. Warren Levinson's AP Poetry Style Report. So it says here, and then you can read along with me. Opens with the sound of jackhammers, running water, and construction noise. There are time bombs under New York, aged a century or more. The one that went off Thursday was put in 1904. The water mains under 40. Oh, the water mains under 42nd Street gave way. So excuse the reading. I'm just reading this for the first time with you. Okay, so then there's a Gaynor. It says a Gaynor is a sound clip that says some of our older mains. That's safe to say. So then the reporter or the report says Dick Gaynor is a deputy of H2O supply. So you'll note that there is a spelling of that, or the H, and then the you see the little dash and the two and the O, so that you know pronunciation is H2O supply. So half gainer is the sort of thing that you or he or I might have been tempted to attempt instead of catch the train. Since what subway tracks were under equaled 40 weeks of rain. This doesn't read too well, I must actually say, right? I'm going to just move on to what Levinson actually says. Levinson emphasizes the importance of ambient sound. Don't overlook the sound that does not come in quotes in the street sounds of fire rescue, etc., etc. So when we're looking at something like this, for example, like in this type of emotionally, I suppose, underdriven report, okay, we're looking at a bit of like an exposure, so it's like a specialty story that you might find like on CNN, etc. Like it's a expose segment, and this seems to be a bit more a human interest with the railways, whatever it may be that they are talking about, or that's used in that example there. And that's where you can put in a little bit more color, right? So I understand that if you watch CNN, you've watched BBC, and you've watched ENCA, that you know that this is a 24-hour news channel, and that it does depend on segments in between to fill whatever happens between the actual bulletins themselves and whatever the news anchor is talking about, that is worldly or regionally or locally or whatever it may be, right? Okay, let's go to another slide. Let's go to number 7. Personalizing news, put yourself into it, but keep your opinion out of it. All right, so let's say you're doing a couple of interviews, right? And you're doing street vox, or you're doing some sound bites, or whatever it may be. Like you will be chatting to some people, right? The interview, if you're going to be chatting to some people and again doing like a bit of an expose or speciality segment, just remember that you are doing investigative journalism. Investigative journalism allows you to understand that what we teach you in broadcast journalism also applies, right? To go and plan, let's say, the interview, to go and search for the right corrective interviewee, the right type, or sure, yeah, the right type. There's the right choice, the correct choice of interview. Remember, the most important part is definitely listening in an interview, because if you listen more, you'll have more of a richer response to what you are saying and a richer conversation. If you present the news in an interesting, topical, and relevant way, the audience will consider or it's a reason to tune in and not to actually tune out. And that makes a lot of sense, right? So listeners are going to feel that they can't go a day without, let's say, finding out a little bit more about what is happening from you as a newscaster, as a news broadcaster, and be part of that particular segment. And again, this really does apply to maybe talk radio more so, and let's say television reporting or television news anchoring, right? Okay, so the top list of tips from reporters. Well, you got to talk to one listener at a time. We know that already. Use silence, it's powerful. So where you find that there is dramatic silence, you need to use that in your delivery. You need to avoid any cliches that you might find, and there are a ton of cliches, but please don't use anything that is sensationalized. Once again, don't use that once upon a time feel. Get new ideas from calling old story sources. So remember the database. I think I've mentioned this before. I'm sure I have. That a newsroom will have, or a station will have a database of contacts of any interviewees that they've had at the station, on shows, over the phone, in call outs, whatever it is, that we want to go and make sure that we document them, either as good as bad or great, or whatever it is that they were professionals in. Maybe they were just commentators from the streets. When I say it, so it's a common person on the street. So from our community, etc., etc. We want to be able to bring in those old sources. Perhaps we can get somewhat of a richer experience, right? Off the record means off the record, right? Don't burn your sources. So if you tell them, if you want to, so what do we do off the record? It's for us to be able to to contextualize maybe our next step, or maybe to understand why it is that they are saying what they are saying. And not to manipulate them either. It's to go and manipulate what it is that you can go do as a next step, and what it is and what you are and what you aren't allowed to actually put out on air without being dragged over to court. Is collecting audio actuality or doing an interview worth the effort? Can you better use what little time that you've got with another story? Ask yourself that question, depending on the relevance of the story. Are you going to extend that by putting in those sound bites, by putting in that interview? And how important is it? When we have an emergency, a state of emergency, it's more important to put, let's say, a live interview during the news and actually have the bulletin carry on for perhaps maybe 7 minutes or so. Localize, know your city, and use familiar terms for anything that is familiar to the community as well. Keep a tease. Make the listener want more later. So that sentence is not complete there. Make them want more later. So in other words, with a tease, we can use that tease right at the top story. So in your top story today, on your news, we do a headline of that. And with the news, I am Chris Jordan at 8 o'clock for BMH Radio. Good morning. And then I will start with that top story, right? And I'll do the actual full bulletin. Don't use the same lead that the reporter uses. It's lazy and it's boring. Also makes you kind of look stupid as well at the end of the day if you are looking at different types of sources to accumulate a new bulletin, then just remember that you should use a different lead. There's different, so lead writing, as we've described before, there's a why, there's a who, there's a what, there's a when, there's a how, whatever it may be, right? Okay. Right, so let's look at more pointers. Rewrite all your source material, please, because it's plagiarism, right? And at the end of the day, when you go and you update your bulletin from hour to hour, go make sure that you do update with some new stories, or you do update the current top story. Use one thought per sentence. So one thought per actuality, right? Why is this important? One, because it's passive listenership, right? Passive listenership is in the need of being able to consume information in very small amounts. You also want to be able to have enough a short enough information to be able to execute it correctly without this heavy breathing in between and in and out. Right, to be actually heard. Maintain a sense of speech rhythm in your writing and a sense of rhythm. So maintain a sense of speech rhythm in your writing. So read it out loud before you read it on air. Please do that about 8 to 10 times with the bulletin before you do go out on air, so that you can make sure that if there are any when I say accents, that do have inflections on names, definitely, that you do pronounce them correctly. So names of people, names of cities, names of places, and then also then the wording and as I'd say the execution. So we say enunciation, the way that you enunciate something is also correct. If you are a bit lost, always go and YouTube that before, and make sure that when you are printing out, let's say a hard copy, let's say you are running towards, if you are using hard copy, that you do make those particular little notes where you are in need of a breath, or where you need to focus on an inflection, whatever it may be, right? Avoid statistics if you can, because it makes a listener confused, right? Only use the really important statistics. So, and one or two of them, right? Use them sparingly, in other words. So no one knows what it is in your sound recorder but you. So use only the best and most powerful sounds. In other words, the sound bites that you do retrieve, please cut and edit them to only what is important to add value to the bulletin itself. So save time by listening to recorded audio on the way back to the studio. When you've gone out to do the story, you've gone the sound bites, you've chatted to the people, you're going to now go back to go and compile the story. Then why not use that time to listen to the station, listen to other stations that are recording or reporting on the same story, or listen to your own audio, and then make decisions. You will never get every detail into the story, so decide what is going to be important to leave in and what is important to leave out. Okay. So from veteran newsman Ed Walsh, here are a couple of closing tips for part one of this lesson. Okay. Know when to file and collect more information for a follow-up report. So kind of read the room, know that this is going to be a long-running story and that you should be able to maybe get some contact numbers, go and see some semantics to see whether something is open from this time to this time, any logistics that might be obstacles that might delay you, or might again also give you like a better edge, like a better position in the running pack of other journalists, right? Go and do that. Wear comfortable shoes because you don't need to be walking around in like Prada heels. The value of most press releases received rarely exceeds the cost of the bandwidth required to send them. Develop local angles to international stories. So, in saying that, do that sparingly, please. Why we say that is because an international story has a ripple effect on what it is that we are doing here in South Africa, right? So, don't always now have to make it about South Africa, but again, choose the information that is relevant to a South African, either whether it be to expand our knowledge on, let's say, a war that is happening, or let's say indictments that are happening with certain presidents. It is important for us to know, right? Or if there is an actual ripple effect, a knock-on effect that doesn't have an effect on South Africans, then obviously you should put that into the story. Put life into your copy, right? Avoid over attribution. So what does that mean? Don't describe things too much. It gets a little bit confusing. It starts sounding like nonsense at the end of the day. You're not writing a creative story. Use the present tense wherever possible to make it new. So even if you are reporting about an incident that has happened yesterday, you will then use the word is instead of was in the aftermath sentences. So the sentences that follow afterwards. Tell me a story, one true one, but a story. And then there are tips there that I'm not going to actually go through, right? Because the tips are 3 pages long. But if you do scroll on over to page 232 to let you know that you're on the right track. When we look at Sharon's tips, we're looking at quality never goes out of style, don't run out with rumors, keep your views out of news, etc., etc. Right, Mike Howell will talk about grabbing with the lead, don't pull with punches, concentrate on what politicians do, not so much on what they say. Well, that's a new one. When I say a new one, that's we've yeah, no comment, right? No comment. Put that as a news thing, right? When interviewing, you listen. For example, look for story ideas in and out of town, in out of town media. So, example, the internet, etc. Trying to get ideas of what is going on. Denise Jimenez Adams, Jimenez, excuse me, Jimenez, yeah, that's right. Jimenez Adams. Her words of advice include things like non-assumptions about your audience, and that the audience might know more than you, so that you would leave out, let's say, certain information. And then the last one is from Lynn Jimenez. Oh, they must be sisters then. All right, Jimenez, and she says, for example, take breaths, pace yourself, learn how to fix any equipment that you need to use. In case you are out a news story and you are holding, let's say, a roving mic, perhaps maybe take a second one just in case, etc. And I was going to say, etc., etc. Why not? It's a Chris thing, right? Okay, I'm going to end this part one on that, and we'll continue from slide 11 in part two.